evening around the world. This is Doug Brunke of Global Chamber, and we've got a really exciting and interesting conversation we're going to have about site selection. So whether you're a company in the United States looking to go out, or you're somewhere else around the world looking to go somewhere else, we've got several of the different angles that you're going to need to know about as you do that. So this is part of a Globinar all around site selection. We've got 3 experts in different areas involved with site selection, and I think you're going to find it really fun and educational. Our first speaker is Jeff Pappas. He's the Executive Vice President of Site Selection and Brokerage at ESRP Real Estate Services. He happens to be based in Dallas, Texas. And Jeff, we really appreciate all that you do, your great work, your support and collaboration with Global Chamber, and we look forward to hearing more about your thoughts. One of the things that really I remember about you over the last couple of years is your mind around the world. You've got a really global viewpoint because you're looking at data in Jakarta and Europe and all over the world for your clients. And maybe of all of the people that I know in commercial real estate, you're the most globally minded that I've met, I think, in my time with Global.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So we look forward to hearing more about your thoughts.
Thank you very much. You want to go ahead and start, or are we going to introduce everybody else?
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Yeah. So, hello, everybody. My name is Jeff Pappas with ESRP. ESRP is a brokerage firm and site selection firm. So we handle tenants only. So we handle only the users of real estate. We don't represent any landlords. And what we do at ESRP is we provide analytics and data that we need to mitigate the risk when you're selecting a new location. So, but basically what we do is we analyze potential competition, whether it be for labor, competition, real estate wise, because again, we do the site selection on the incentive negotiations, all the site selection services when it comes to labor analytics, location strategies, and we do site procurement, real estate site procurement. And we really have been focusing, myself, over the last 10 to 15 years on the contact center BPO industry. Altogether, we've probably negotiated over 10 million square feet, maybe up to 12 million square feet of contact center locations across the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Latin and South America, the Caribbean, UK, Asia, and the Philippines. So we're pretty vast and broad in what we've done for our clients, because our clients are really needing, locations worldwide and come to us, and it could be language related, it could be wage related, it could be time zone related. So what I want to focus on today, because we have 2 great panelists to talk about from an economic development standpoint, or an economic development officer, which is an EDO, and we also have another one that talks about kind of the labor and the war for talent. So I want to focus a little bit on U.S. and global real estate and kind of what our site selection concerns are with our clients in regards to just the real estate specific, but that again, that ties into the labor. So as you know, Amazon has continued its industry-wide disruption. They acquired Whole Foods, they've expanded their headquarters multiple cities. Again, traditional flagship retailers like Sears, Toys R Us have finally succumbed to the crippling pressures brought on by e-commerce. And that's another area that we focus on when we talk about the BPO and the contact center. I want to focus a little bit on the e-commerce. So, so the technological advances continue to transform the jobs that's going to be needed for this economy. So these major developments embody the changing nature of our industry. So the question becomes, how can we evolve our real estate mindsets and adapt to the rules of this new economic climate to ensure sustainable success in the next decade and beyond? So the retail decline is paving the way for industrial's rise. The retail industry's decline has inspired major questions for people within the site selection industry and companies looking for new locations. How will these buildings be repurposed? I think what industries and business activities will fill that gap and make up the sales tax dollars lost by companies that previously occupied these facilities. So an exciting solution is repurposing retail sites into industrial sites. Now, the trend of consumer buying products online is nothing new, right? As I mentioned earlier, Amazon's acquisition of Whole Foods, along with the emerging competition like Instacart, have fundamentally altered the way that consumers shop for groceries and food. So while consumers no longer visit the physical grocery stores often in the past, communities and companies have an opportunity to repurpose retail facilities into distribution centers and warehouse facilities to support these delivery needs for this economy. Interestingly enough, by 2025, up to 25% of all retail sales will occur online. So as retail continues to be further driven by e-commerce, corporations should seek out site selectors and economic development organizations, or EDOs, that carefully balance all these options and look for innovative ways to repurpose space that has fallen out within this industry. So this evolving economy, it does bring current and future challenges. While the lack of skilled workers and usable buildings serve as the biggest risk within the industry, these market pressures don't seem to be going away anytime soon. So, again, these factors here make it imperative to not only repurpose underutilized buildings, but reevaluate the labor and the workforce to make sure those fit that economy. So, as manufacturers are beginning to compete with Google, Apple, and other tech giants for these top tech talent, this will have a profound impact on the facility needs and the future site selection strategy of the company. So, the tightness of the industrial real estate market is a concern for a lot of my clients. There's a shortage of good industrial sites across the country. So when we look back at these fundamental changes in our economy and workforce as indicators of what to come, we have to understand these issues and the best way to develop and repurpose these. So there's been a lot written about the impact of e-commerce on retail. Store closing, malls are struggling to define what a major store is. So reading these stories, it's easy to get the impression that e-commerce is cratering real estate markets and creating ghost towns, which is really, that's not the case. At least not in major cities where e-commerce actually had an opposite effect by increasing the demand for real estate. So if accommodating growth was the only issue, retailers would just simply expand their existing regional distribution centers in areas where land is relatively inexpensive and readily available. But that's not a viable strategy because the e-commerce market is dominated by a major player with the market power to reset consumer expectations for e-commerce delivery. First, it was just 2-day delivery, then it's next-day delivery, and now it's same-day delivery. Pretty soon it's going to be within the hour. So everyone in the market must adapt to these changing expectations or risk losing market share. So simply, you just can't simply provide next day or same day delivery just from regional warehouse. So there's that challenge in reverse. There's also a challenge in reverse logistics. Return rates for in-store purchases average less than 10%, while e-commerce return rates can be 30% or higher. So the challenge now is not only to get return goods back from the consumer, but how do you do so without destroying all its economic value? So one solution is developing a small, dedicated site where consumers can return goods more efficiently. So these factors are driving e-commerce companies and the 3PL partners to increasingly supplement their network of regional distribution centers with smaller satellite facilities capable of reducing lead times. So the rise of e-commerce, again, is the primary reason for the growing demand of new warehouse space. So we look at what a word is, kind of the new urban warehouse. So what is the new urban warehouse? It'd be easy just to shrink down the design of a large regional warehouse to fit in the smaller footprints to be available in urban areas, but that's just not practical and that's not what's needed. So with product movement being the way that it is, a trend that's emerging, especially internationally, especially in gateway cities like Hong Kong, Singapore, is the development of the multi-story warehouse. This trend is now expanding from the Far East all the way to the UK. Now, the multi-story industrial estate phenomenon, it's still in infancy in the U.S. compared just in the U.S. just because we have so much land, right? So it's really not as cost effective here in the States. So you're seeing these multi-story distribution centers allow, smaller footprints, allow easier access to the consumers. Don't have amount of significant storage space, but they have as many doors as possible, so inventory can get in and get out extremely quickly. So while the future isn't always entirely clear, one thing is certain: distribution is moving closer to end customers. And that means more distribution centers and more urban environments. So I'm going to stop here and kind of let you sink in my thoughts on e-commerce and kind of the real estate side of our decisions, not so much just the labor and meeting with economic development. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Jeff. We'll definitely come back to that, and the questions are coming in. The two different ways to do it is either through the Q&A on the box for those of you who are watching, or as you know, info@globalchamber.org. That gets you questions, and so thank you those of you who know the drill and have already started sending in your questions. We will get to the questions in the final 25 minutes or so of the broadcast, and we'll be finishing right at the top of the hour. Our next speaker, unfortunately, has a cold, and so we're sad to hear that, but we're very happy to have her here with us. Carol Mello is the Regional Alliance Manager at Safeguard Global, based in Europe, with a U.S. headquarters in Austin, Texas. Carol has got an amazing international background, even before she worked in talent and helping companies with both finding talent and also making sure administratively they could be paid in foreign countries. Carol has been involved in all aspects, or many different aspects, of international business, and so she's a really great resource to have. And so Carol, thank you for your support of Global Chamber, being on the Global Chamber San Francisco Advisory Board, and just all the things that you do. We look forward to hearing from you today.
Great, Doug. Thank you for the introduction. As Doug said, my name is Carol Mello, and I work for Safeguard Global. I'm based out of San Francisco Bay Area and cover a lot of the California market from a business development perspective, but deal with clients from all over the world. So what Safeguard does is we're international EOR. I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with it, but I'm just going to take a few minutes to explain what that is for people that are not familiar with that. So is a employer of record. So what that means is that we have currently working in 179 countries to be able to employ the world's workforce for any clients. We do US outbound and then any country outbound. So it doesn't matter if you're a US company going internationally, or if you're a company from Spain going to Brazil, or if you're a company from Japan going into South Africa. We do always. And essentially what that is because we operate in 179 countries, our clients do not need to set up entity to hire people in those countries. Now, let me just do a disclosure here. Obviously, if you're hiring a sales team and your intent is to close global contracts right away, you need to look at your taxes in country and make sure that you're operating within something that won't trigger a tax nexus or have to pay taxes in that country. And that is something that we always tell our clients. With that said, a lot of clients will use us to put the country manager on the ground, and really build their presence before they're creating that huge revenue in country and they have to report those taxes under their entity. The way in which a lot of clients also use us is by doing development hubs. So if they want to hire developers in another country, or they simply have contractors, they're working full-time, so they wouldn't really classify as a contractor, and they want to make sure that they're decreasing their liability money and they don't get into trouble internationally, they will go ahead and then put them under our coverage. So they're making sure that they're paying people compliantly and they have an employment contract in place that is legal in that country. So interestingly enough, a lot of times we work with clients that tend to think that they are only an international company if their product or services are entering in your market. So a lot of times, they might think, oh, I'm not in the case of the US, they might not think they are international because they might say, I only cover the US market. However, I do have contractors sitting in 4 different countries to create the output that I need to fulfill my US contracts. Well, in our view, that is already an international company because part of your workforce is sitting in another country. So we like to think that, people are thinking about those things and being proactive about the way to operate internationally, because we want to make sure that our clients don't run into any compliance issues. For all of you in the international world, you know about GDPR, you know about data compliance, you know about lawsuits that can come from essentially misclassifying contractors internationally. So what we do is we help clients understand those regulations all over the world, protect their asset, protect their company, and essentially give them the peace of mind to know that they are operating in a way that is compliant worldwide. I know I'm talking about compliance a lot, and sometimes is the white elephant in the room, but it just goes to say that if you think about that ahead of time, it becomes, really easy to address when an issue comes, as opposed to getting hit with a compliance fee or a lawsuit internationally. So what we say is, what do you think about EOR, right? So you can essentially think about a strategy side of your company, because a lot of people, they automatically think, if I need to hire somebody internationally, I need an entity. That is the case sometimes, depending on what licensing you need, or like I said, if you're already closing contracts and you already have a big amount of revenue coming from that country, yes, you might have to, but that's not always the case. So we really look at strategy for our clients and how to make the best of it. A lot of times, specifically for US companies, specifically in the San Francisco region, they're looking a lot in the tech world, so they need a lot of development work. So that way we are able to give them access to talent hubs all over the world in which they can source those developers and really have them live and working within 2 weeks, and really fulfilling US contracts from a remote location. So it gives the opportunity of people to really hire a global workforce fast, to increase their speed to market. It also virtually eliminates liability, because you're making sure that in each country you're operating under the rules and regulations. So if you're talking about, employment in France or Brazil that historically have a lot of rules around them, you need to be prepared for those. And a lot of times, if you are expanding and you don't have the bandwidth in your country of origin to deal with that subsidiary, you end up running on issues for just making sure that you're complying with all those, being enrolling people into pension or certain benefits that you have to provide, or, making sure that you are going through that motion. And it's very hard to do so when that's not your core business and you don't have the staff to operate that, second, third, or fourth, and set up that subsidiary the way you're supposed to. So that's how we kind of walk people through that. I talk about like access to global pool. So really going in where the talent is, if you can't find the talent in your area. Also, since you're looking at a company that sits as an EOR, you don't have to source for those local vendors. If you're looking into benefits, payroll, the insurance, everything that it takes to get that up and running. And you're easily able to action all that from your country. So I can't really go down into it. There's very specific information that comes to different people operating in different countries, if you're a sole proprietorship as well as a huge enterprise. So there are differences. And we're able to create essentially for our clients, there's a lot of times they know they want to go to Latin America, but they don't understand the employment regulations. So they might be thinking about 4 or 5 different countries, but until they look and see clearly how, you know, the government operates in those countries, how taxes operate, it's very hard for them to make a decision. So a lot of times we're pulling out, you know, benefit pricing, we're pulling out, you know, all the regulations in that country, and we're able to show the clients the overhead on the employment ahead of time so they can make an educated decision about where they need to go and where will be more strategic to do so at. So like I said, you know, this is a long conversation about actioning global workforce, but it's just an idea to give to people that there are other options to entity setup depending on where your business stands. And that's what we've been doing. We've been on the market for the longest time as a company on the EOR space. We've been around for about 8 years. So it's still a fairly new solution compared to, you know, setting up an entity and hiring contractors. Contractors work, and they can work, and they do work for a lot of people. I would just say that if you want to use those, you have to make sure that they are registered in country to operate as contractors, just like you would in the US or any other country. You also have to make sure that you're complying with the government hours for contractors, and that by that, it means that in some countries it might be as little as 25 hours constitutes full-time employment. So you really have to look in the law and make sure that you have an employment contract in place, even if it's a contractor agreement, making sure that that complies with local regulation. So I'm hammering all about the local regulation because that's very important to understand when you're operating a company. Again, I'm sure there will be questions about that, but I would say, Doc, that that's a good, essentially, you know, snap into what we do and how people can use EOR all over the world.
Okay, very good. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And our last speaker is Susana Trasente. Susana is been very involved in the Metro Phoenix area in different areas. And one of the really cool things is that she has actually worked at one of the largest, if not the largest employer in the Metro Phoenix area and in Arizona, a company called Freeport-McMoRan and the mining industry. She's also worked at a strategic level with the Maricopa Association of Governments, and now she's working for the city of Peoria, and she leads projects in economic development. And undoubtedly, every day, Susana, you are talking to companies, talking to people who are looking to relocate, most of them in, which is really cool. And Peoria is growing very fast. You've got a lot of different projects. And so if you could tell us a little bit more about kind of what companies can think about in terms of their site selection, if they're looking to maybe come out the Western United States and Arizona and Peoria, and definitely tell us about Peoria because it's a great place as well.
Thank you, Doug. Yeah, really happy to be in Peoria. We have a great leader, as you know him, Rick Buss, and he does an amazing job, especially internationally. He really understands that market. So great to be here. Thank you. But I think this webinar is so important because if you do business solely in the United States, it's roughly about 96% that the world's consumers are outside of that market. So you're missing quite a bit of your consumers if you're only doing business here in the US. And it's really important to diversify your business into new markets. You're able to strengthen your bottom line, you're able to diversify it, and you're able to compensate when maybe your primary market is not going very well. So and eventually that's what large corporations like to do. They like to achieve diverse portfolios because of the same reason. So when you're talking about exporting, you have different key factors to always consider. So for example, you have tax issues. So what type of taxes is the new market that you're going into? What type of taxes are they charging you, or will they charge you? Any foreign currency exchange rates, maybe there's a daily major fluctuation that can dramatically increase or decrease your bottom line, and it's something that you really have to take into consideration. And then, of course, you would also have national regulations within that country, and as Carol was saying, also at the local level, and it's really important because it might even prohibit from selling a certain product that you think might be popular within that country, but it might not be very well known. And because of that, you also have items like your product that is well known in your current country may not be known in the country you're going into. So because of that, the customs might also affect that, because they might not be able to define your product very well. They might not be able to have a code for you. And because of that, that's time unfortunately wasted. And you run into these small issues that actually become a bigger issue later on. So really knowing the market and analyzing the market before you go in is very important. But I think another major point is also within that market, are there competitors? If so, what's your competitive advantage on that? And when you're talking about importing, another big one is the big T word, which is tariffs. And are there special trade advantages within one specific country over another? And I know a big hot topic right now, especially in Arizona, and what impacts my work right now is the USMCA and making sure that that's gonna go through. So if it does, again, that's a special trade advantage that we would have. And another would be market availability. If the market is oversaturated, why would you be going into that market having that strategic plan in place? And within that, you also have investing into the market you're going in. At what level would you like to invest? And in a lot of the small companies, what you see is they operate based on e-commerce, and it might be just shipping that product over to that country. And later on, it turns out that they're getting a lot more business. So maybe going into there and investing maybe having a shelter company there, maybe you would like to acquire a company, or better yet, partnerships where hopefully you're the majority partner in that transaction. And I think overall, every country and every city that you go to is very different, but what you always have to be aware of is that cultural awareness. And I think we Americans, including myself, we have that transactional point of view, meaning that a lot of the work we do is just solely based on that. What is it going to do to my bottom line? But in other countries, and you see a lot of the corporations get into some troubles here and there, because they're not thinking about the relationships, and they're not thinking about investing in human capital. So being culturally aware is very important. And I think overall too, is we here, especially has been my experience in Arizona, that knowing your resources. And for me, I personally worked with several organizations that have been very helpful, all the way from at the federal level, the U.S. Commercial Services. They really know their foreign markets, and they're really able to help and assess ahead of time. At the state level, and of course at the city level, we work very well at the city and state level to help incentivize any companies that are willing to come and see what we can do to help them figure out what would be the best path, if this market is right for them or not. And of course, definitely not to make a shameless plug or anything, but at all those levels, I've worked very well with the Global Chamber, and really knowing the resources, I think, is key factor, because you really understand more, and you're able to not step on many, you're not able to make all those mistakes that hopefully you'll avoid with those resources. So I'll leave it at that. And if there's any additional questions, I'm here to answer them.
Very good. Thank you, Susana. I'm going to ask each of you to talk about the process that you use in a moment. I just want to give a little bit more information around the overall process of site selection. Each of the three experts we're speaking with today is handling it in a little bit different way. Jeff has clients that he works with that are looking to potentially move around the world, and there's a variety of factors involved with the decision process to do that. Carol, in a similar way, where companies probably have taken the next step and now are looking to find more information about how to handle the labor force wherever they're doing. Ideally, they've thought about that in the site selection process, but many times they may come to the labor side of it too late. And so it's definitely better to consider that during the early part of the phase. And then in the case of Susana, she is receiving companies. So they're coming from a variety of different areas, whether they're entities like Global Chamber or they're finding Peoria on their own, and they're having conversations about a variety of topics. And typically what those would be specifically around the location, and the workforce, real estate factors, what's the tax structure, more around the region, perhaps the state and the country. Infrastructure, what does that look like? What incentives are available, either at the city or state or country level? Regulatory issues, the cost of living, unionization and its degree of unionization, which might potentially hinder or help depending on your industry. What's the air service there? We just did an event on international direct service to a city, and that definitely helps with business and makes business a lot easier not to have to stop in some city on your way to the world. The quality of life in that city. What's the crime rate? Is it low? Hopefully. What's the education? From K through 12 up to higher ed. What's the situation with that location? What's the housing? What are the cultural factors? What are the environmental factors? And then, what is the community resources available? And so, Susana, you mentioned about being aware of cross-cultural issues, and that's very important, and that should be definitely considered on the front end. So I'll start with you, Jeff, kind of circling back. The first question we have for you is related to the process that you use in terms of how do you deal with someone who is looking to go overseas. And that presumes, and it may not be correct, that many of the clients that you work with are in the Texas area, but I believe that you actually work with clients all over the world. So tell us a little bit more about, as companies come in, what are some of the things that they should be thinking about, and what process do you walk them through to get to a better solution?
Well, I think, I hope people can still hear me, but I think you're right. Most of my clients are U.S.-based clients that are looking U.S. and globally, right? So, and it's always something different when it comes down to the project scope. It could be wage, it could be time zone, it could be a certain service of our clients, and it could be language. And so what we've done is, at the very beginning, defining, all the different aspects of why, A, it is a new center, or B, if it's a relocation of the center, what are the key criteria, right? For instance, we did a project for a client of ours that's in Germany, and they need to support German. So we put them into Poland at a 30 to 35% low cost. Now, we looked at some of the key factors in that decision was, in Poland, where in Poland do we have, quality German as their initial language, right? It's not always just as simple as, well, they're bordering, so yeah, it shouldn't be a problem. Well, that's not necessarily the case. Maybe on the border it is, but then when the border starts to get more concentrated with companies that are supporting German, then we have to look at other parts of Poland that are large enough to access the right size of labor. What I mean by that is it 100 people? Is it 200 people? Is it 700 people? Then you got to put into consideration the turnover and the attrition factor, right? And so you got to make sure that if you lose one person, you have to be able to backfill that, effectively. Now, there's two ways to look at it. There's positive attrition and there's negative attrition, right? Positive attrition is you have the inbound customer support agent that you move to the supervisor. Now you've got to fill the entry level role. Now, if the person becomes maybe not as successful as a supervisor, and you have to let go of that person, and you have a hard time filling the supervisor role, and you have a hard time filling the entry level role, you've lost two roles with one, positive, one positive hire, right, so to speak. So we have to put that in consideration. So we look at, a client in the Netherlands is, needing some cost-effective Dutch, so we're looking at the Caribbean, right, because, you have a market in Curacao, right, that you can look at it as possibly having Dutch. So you have to look at all these different aspects of, benchmarking what they're doing in that market and saying good and bad and comparing those to the new market in the exact same way. So I think from the data points that we utilize, right, so, the war for talent everywhere is crazy. So you have to make sure that you have a site selector that understands that industry, understands how to analyze the wages, the skill sets, the saturation, but also the growth of that market. And we've done that for our clients, blending their KPIs with our predictive labor analytics to identify, location patterns and trends, right? So, and that has to be done up front, right? You can't look at a real estate site, hope that it works and try to find people. You can't find a great market without real estate, right? That doesn't make sense. If it's quick, right? If you have to be up and operational quickly, you got to find the right labor market with the right real estate. If you have time, you can find the right labor market and build the real estate. But you have to make sure that both the real estate and the labor factors are compatible.
Okay, so with labor and real estate, kind of which came first, the real estate or the labor? And it sounds like it's a process that is interactive. Is it forming?
Right.
It sounds like it's very custom.
Right, they go hand in hand, right? Because when you think of an operating cost, it could be up to 90%, 80 to 90% is human capital, and only 5 to 10% is your real estate cost, right? And so, being in a facility, in a market, but hey, being in a market, you have to be in the right market, right? That's first and foremost. Then it's where in that market do you need to be, right? Where are your competitors? Where's the labor? Where's the growth going to be in 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now? So that way you pick the right location in that right city, but 10 years from now, you don't have to move. You're in the right location because you picked it, because you thought that process out, 9, 12, 18 months prior to even opening that location, right? So, yes, the labor has to be there, that's first and foremost. But then, of course, the facility has to be there to incorporate those people. You're starting to see a lot more of at-home agents, but at-home agents is getting, maybe it's popular at some cost savings. The problem is you have to make sure that you have a facility that these home people can go into on a periodic basis, because I know working at home on 24/7 has got to be extremely difficult. So you've got to tie in, the labor, the real estate, and then your potential patterns of what you're going to do hiring 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now. It's difficult for some companies. Sometimes they can't think 6 months out, right? More than, thinking 3 to 5 to 7 years out. But that's how we help our clients in that process is, A, where do you need to be? Is it in this country? Is it X country? Who you're supporting? Why you're supporting them? What are the languages being supported? What are the wage? What are the wage concerns? Attrition. So you have to put all these into account before you even start selecting what markets to go into. So it's a pretty long, drawn-out process. You know, it's not just, okay, I need a facility next month. Where should I be? This is my language skills. It's a lot more detailed than that.
Okay, and so the process, you use a process then when people approach you, they're giving you information, you ask for certain information, you walk them through that, and then take them all the way through. What aspects of that site selection process are you involved with?
So I'm actually involved in, you know, most of it from I assist in the labor analytics. So we have Evan Stair in our office. We have the director of site selection. He's a GIS certified, you know, master's degree, teaches it. He runs our analytics department. So we bring in the analytics team, right? So that'll determine, you know, the part of the location strategy. Myself and my partner, Susan Arledge, when it comes down to real estate, we assist in the real estate. So making sure that, okay, once these market work, are there real estate and satisfactory real estate sites that tie in to the labor analytics? Then we have economic incentives. Susan and Hart in our office, two partners of mine, handle the incentives as well. So we handle the incentives part of it, the real estate part of it, and then the market strategy, location strategy part of it as well, all within house. So I'm part of our team is incorporated into all aspects of it. So, you know, a lot of companies will use a tax company to help with the incentives. They'll use a site selection firm to help with the analytics. They'll use another separate real estate company, whether it be in maybe a real estate company in each market. So maybe 5 different companies if you're looking at 5 different markets, so 5 different real estate companies, and they're not all on the same page. The pleasure that we have is that since we're all integrated together within our team, that labor's not solely driving it, real estate's not driving it, incentives not driving it, they're all a piece of it. So every site and every market is analyzed identical from a standpoint of, okay, the labor works, the real estate works, the incentives are X. So instead, because if you have, you know, if you do it in all these different parts, you can have the site selector giving you a great labor market, the real estate doesn't work, and then the incentives aren't going to work for that market because of a wage scale, right? So now you've got one piece of the puzzle solved and 2 other pieces not solved. Or you have great incentives in that market, but you have no real estate and labor's not there to satisfy, right? Or you got to pay 10% higher, 50% higher just to get the incentive. It doesn't make financial sense. So then then the real estate guy finds a great site, but there's no incentives, and the labor can't satisfy it. You've got a real estate site, you can make a great real estate decision, but you haven't made a good labor decision or a good incentive decision. So incentives don't drive it, but they're a good, you know, they make a good deal better, not a bad deal good. Real estate's vital because you have to have a site to house people in. But most importantly, the labor has to fit for the client. And so our integrated approach really helps companies and feel comfortable that everybody's on the same page, pulling the same weight, fighting for that certain goal of the right facility, while finding the available labor, identifying the right property that reduces attrition, increases productivity, and improves the quality of that service and retention. That's what our goal is.
So you're not Texas or Dallas centric at all, other than you're living there. You get involved in places all over the world. I presume you might have been involved with the decision where you guys moved to Frisco and decided to.
Yeah,
right?
Our department was a big part of that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we analyzed companies that are looking to stay in Dallas and relocate to Dallas. Where should they relocate in Dallas? East, west, north, or south, right? Based on their labor needs, based on their real estate needs, based on their cost needs, based on their incentive needs. Same thing. We compare Dallas to Atlanta, to Indy, to Tulsa. We do analysis there. We've compared, 3 cities in the United States versus 3 cities in South America and a city in the Caribbean, and compare the project scope, right, from what the client needs, right? And So we don't do a lot of, U.S. versus offshore, nearshore, because it's usually a nearshore project, an offshore project, or a nearshore project, right? When I say offshore, I'm talking Europe, Asia, Africa. When I say nearshore, I think of, Latin America, South America, and then of course onshore is the U.S. So we're analyzing markets against markets, countries against countries, and cities against cities. And sometimes we're going even so deep into finding sub-markets, and, there may be 7 cities within one city of Dallas. So we're comparing Plano with McKinney, and McKinney with Garland with Addison, because they have their own incentive package. They have their own labor profile, right? And then, of course, they have their own real estate costs. So it works 3 different ways: city by city, state by state, country by country.
Got it. So you mentioned all those different towns. So Peoria, Susana, is similar, right? You've got people approaching you directly, but then you're working on regional. Maybe they want to come to the Metro Phoenix area, and you're part of a team that might be looking at, a warehousing in Goodyear, or a Litchfield Park, or in Peoria. And so now there's a team, if you will, from a community that's somewhat competitive, I'm sure.
Yes, Jeff actually touched on some really good points that that's exactly what we're looking for, where sometimes we're working with the state or regional leaders that are bringing in a certain company that's interested in the region, and then they start narrowing it down based on the sites that are available, and like Jeff said, again, the labor market and what each city has to offer, and the driving distance between those times. So it's really important to know your facts and know what your community has to offer. So for example, here in Maricopa County, it's one of the fastest growing counties. In 2025, we're expected to hit about 5.3 million people. And by 2045, it's going to be about 6.9 million. So again, we have in Peoria, we're lucky to have that educated market that fits with the young population, and incentives are make the deal better, like Jeff said, but again, incentives also can deeply vary on what the type of business is coming in, and any capital expenditures that they're bringing in, what does that amount to, the wages that are coming in, of course, and you're right, Doug, it really depends. We are really good at collaborating together, but at the end of the day, sometimes each city has a different approach, and we have different things that we can offer. So really knowing what that is very helpful in doing your research and educating the people that you need to, that way that they know when it's front and center.
Okay, and in Jeff's case, clearly part of their criteria was not getting a really good football team. I'm a New York Giants fan, so I apologize for the bad Dallas.
And hopefully we'll get better.
Yeah, and why I mention it in particular cases that Frisco is home of the Dallas Cowboys training facility, and it's actually incorporated into ESRP's headquarters there. So it's an amazing facility, not a very good football team, but a tremendous commercial real estate facility in a great location. Carol, we've heard both Jeff and Susana talk about labor, and so it plugs in all along the way. When you are working with a client, are you working just one-on-one? Do you get involved with people like Jeff and Susana, whether it's commercial real estate or other entities that are supporting companies, and then with the cities and states and others as they start to make some decisions and then really implement? Because I know you're really strong on the implementation side.
Yeah, so we definitely, we don't work directly through those things with them. We're really on the human capital employment. Think about us as their international HR, right? So instead of having HR in each country or trying to manage all those countries from the US, they really hand it over to us, and then all they're doing is essentially managing day-to-day activities, and they don't have to worry about anything related to HR. We do all that. So, but as far as working with other people, absolutely. Like clients will come to us and say, hey, I've been with you for, I don't know, 3 years, but now I'm thinking about, really going in to the market and settling, and I want to establish entity. And now I went from a team of 2 to 5 to 10. And sometimes they have 50 people under us, but they like come to us and say, hey, I need real estate. I need to figure this out. Or do you know anybody? So we do a lot of referrals when we get those questions. So we absolutely, within our network, we work, with people that are looking into markets from a product market fit, and they understand the market and they know distributors and all that. We also work with real estate companies, we work with recruiting companies. So we work with a lot of those functions. We deal just with the HR side of it. So employment, right? Paying people, making sure that they're compliant in country. So that is our wheelhouse. But we definitely send it to other people that are part of the international business, and they can assist the clients with the next steps when they're looking into really setting up shop and getting the company operational in that country. So make sure that they have all the help, and they can navigate through that new market in a way in which makes sense. Because especially for US companies, I think that perhaps I think it's a little different. If you're in the global space, you might understand this, but there's a lot of US-centric views on how the world operates. So for us, a lot of times when we're dealing with the US clients, we have to walk through, there's no at-will employment and things like that, mostly anywhere else in the world. So that is the specific US field that we try to address. I tend to find that when I'm looking with international clients, they understand that on a better level. So it's really just giving them the tools within the community and pointing them out the right direction so they can utilize their time as best as possible and make sure that they understand the market that they're going in.
Okay, and how does that happen? Does that come through you, or do you connect them up to people in Safeguard, let's say in Bangladesh or other places where they want to locate, or how does that information get to the company?
Yeah, so my current job role, I'm a regional alliance and partnership manager. So I do B2B for the company, and I do a ton of education. Once they come through, well, if they're coming through me, I do a lot of the pre-work when I am part of a couple advisory companies in the Bay Area in which I sit down with mostly founders around here and help them develop international business strategy, ask them questions and essentially educate them on that. So if it's coming from me, absolutely, I'm happy to answer any questions. If it's just somebody that went through the website and got handed over to our sales team, they're also very knowledgeable and they will guide the person through whatever they need. I would say because of my network, I can help clients with local vendors that work on an international scale a lot more. But throughout our company, if we don't know, or if somebody from sales doesn't know, they're always reaching out and asking for referrals that we already use. So yeah, the network is pretty tight, and they can get that information from anyone in our company because everybody is trying to make sure that they understand the full cycle and they have people supporting them. So we work with preferred vendors and people we trust. So they will get that in any level, Doug, but definitely if you have, an educational person in market like I am in the Bay Area, you can sit down like one-to-one and really be that much more catered to the client.
Okay, understand.
Yeah.
So this conversation will be this video and we're going to have a blog post on it, so we'll have additional information and including the contact information for all three people. If you need to get a hold of them now or can't figure out how to do that, info@globalchamber.org. We'll get connected there. What I would do then in the last, looks like we have about 2 minutes left. So if you each could take 30 seconds and maybe just recap anything else that you think is missing or any other advice that you have. Think about a CEO sitting in Oklahoma and they're thinking about maybe putting something in Asia or in Europe, and they've gone through a process and they they hopefully in their own mind have checked all the boxes, but maybe not. What should they be thinking about? And then, share any other thoughts that you have. But 30 seconds each. Maybe Susana, you want to go first?
Yeah, of course. First of all, thanks for having me on, Doug. And I think one topic I did not mention is infrastructure and the importance of that. So making sure that your infrastructure is there if you're in manufacturing or even mining, especially mining actually. And in Peoria, we're lucky to have not only rail access, but easy access to highways. And that is a major help to a lot of the companies that we work with.
Yeah, and warehouse area and space for warehousing and access to California and Texas both ways. So there's some really unique things about Peoria and it's a reason why it's growing, Phil.
Yeah. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you very much. Carol, would you like to, anything that you've left out or that you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah, so thank you so much as well for having me, Doug. And I appreciate the Global Chamber doing what it does for, the community. And I think you're an invaluable tool for anybody that wants to understand more about the global space. So I would just say that, I think the most important thing is really, I know it sounds like trivial, but it's planning. I think with all of that, all we're talking about is just a matter of be prepared, because sometimes we all know that the board requests you to get somebody live in a certain country, or you need to move operations, like that happens, or you need to create output for your company. And there's a whole community to connect with and ask help. And we're all here to help guide people to what it means to go international and how we can assist and how we can give tools for them and connect them to the right people. So I would say just reach out to the community, to Doug, to us, and we're more than happy to help you with any questions that you have. Because again, everything is so industry specific and it depends on where your company might be at that point in time.
Absolutely. So if you're in the US looking to go international to Asia, Europe, Africa, or Texas, whatever international location. Oh, is Texas international? Wait a minute. No, it's still in the United States. So that's a good thing. And it's a great state. It's doing some really great work. And Jeff, I'm sure you're right in the middle of a lot of that. Anything else you'd like to say as we close down?
Reiterating it, I want to thank you for allowing me to present, to speak. Susana, Carol, you guys have been fantastic. I'm honored to be on a panel with you both. I think
Same time.
I think you're welcome. I think from a site selection standpoint, call me, hire me, hire a site selector. I've always said that my competition isn't companies that do kind of what we do, but it's companies that do it themselves, because a lot of times they feel like they can do it all themselves, and they need that third party to kind of make sure that they understand the markets they're looking at and they're not biased, right? If the the sales guy recommends a city, he probably has a reason why he's recommending that city. If the HR is recommending that city, they probably have a reason that they're recommending that city. Does it fit IT? Does it fit salespeople? Does the salespeople's idea fit HR, IT, real estate? But you have to have someone that can tie those all together to make sure that the company makes the right decision, right? We don't solely just give you data and allow you to make the decision. We provide the data, help analyze the data, and help that company make that decision, whether it be, validating a market they've looked at or finding a new market that they haven't considered. Because companies are getting bombarded by cities, states, countries saying, look, come here, come here, come here. We have great people, we have great labor, we have great wages, and they have to be able to analyze those unbiasedly, and that's kind of what we do for our clients. We keep the other cities at bay that don't work and just focus on the ones that could work to make that company even better, more profitable, retaining employees, improving their services. So different ways that we help with it. And it's not just the contact center and BPO industry. We do this for our site selection services, run the gamut for industrial clients, logistics companies, 3PLs, last mile, warehouse, distribution, food, retail, We do some retail work, and we do majority of office work, you know, from insurance companies, healthcare companies, medical companies, you know, that have, you know, that are primarily office, that are still hiring, you know, have a need for, you know, comparing what an embalmer makes to what a picker and packer makes at Amazon, right? You have to be able to fully compare those. And so really what we do fits so many different industries, not just the BPO back office, but so many different industries that are growing and that have the need for located strategies. So basically, give me a call.
Outstanding information, and I think we've done hundreds of these events, and I think you're the first person that said hire me. But you know, there's so much validity to that, and it's something we feel so passionate about at Global Chamber, because our core members are exporters, importers, and investors, and we watch them make mistakes. It's very frustrating to watch those of you out there that are out there, and everybody's made mistakes, right? But so many mistakes are made in the process. And so our focus in on service providers that are great and that can help people avoid the mistakes and have great business growth it's what it's all about. And so when he says hire, we say the same thing. Hire Jeff, hire go to Peoria, see a spring training game, check out the Metro Phoenix area, and bring together the Global Chamber tribe to your company so that you'll be more successful. So thank you all three for really great information. Watch out there for more information. This being wrapped up in the next week to 10 days in a blog post and a recording. And I want to thank you all. Our next conversation is next week on hot global markets. We're going to go across the 12 hot markets that are happening in the world and the regions and the markets. So check in on that. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Doug.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, guys.